Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining early. We will start shortly. We're going to give 2 more minutes for people to join, 2, 3 minutes. But thank you so much for joining early. Good morning. Welcome for everyone who's just joined. We're just waiting for another minute for more people to join in. The audio works. We've just been quiet. Okay, so we are 3 minutes past the hour. Others will join. Currently, there are 25 people on the call. Um, Please return to. Currently there are 25 people on the call, and I know more people will join in. So we can move on really fast. I'm going to ask for everyone to please introduce themselves in the chat. You could where you come from or your organization. And we're going to just go ahead and start really quickly. So, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining this call. Sorry, excuse me. Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining this call. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to this very important capacity building and agenda setting session, and to thank our facilitator, um, who has joined us from Writing Development, Charlize Tomasil. Charlize is a researcher, educator, activist working at the intersection of environment, justice, political economy, and community-led development. Her work focuses on global political economy of the just transition, with particular attention to how critical minerals extraction shape land, power, and livelihoods in Africa and beyond. She currently serves as research and leading facilitator at the Coalition for Human Rights and Development, where she supports community led strategies that resist green colonialism and center human rights, collective agency, and ecological justice. Charlize also lectures in political ecology and development studies at the University of Cape Town and is completing her PhD in environmental and geographic science. So please, you're welcome with Charlize with me. Um, and I'm just so pleased to welcome you all to this session, a side session for the West African mining host community in Indaba, which is so critical at this time in our history as Africans. And when you think about what's going on in New York this week at the UN General Assembly, which starts today, this very important capacity building agenda setting session on just energy transition discusses policies and strategies, but it also affirms a fundamental principle that the shift to cleaner and more sustainable energy must respect and protect the rights and dignity of communities at the heart of resource extraction. The energy transition is more than a technical or economic shift. It's a profound social transformation. For us as mining host communities, whose lands, livelihoods, and environments have long borne and continue to bear the cost of energy production, the concept of a just transition must not just be an afterthought. It must be a guarantee. It means ensuring that the world moves towards renewable energy and low carbon economies. No community is left behind. No family is dispossessed without remedy. No worker is abandoned without opportunity. And no community becomes a legend or a myth. For a human rights perspective, justice in energy transition, it requires us to prioritize participation, accountability, and equity. We, as mining host communities, must be meaningfully consulted, not only when minerals are extracted from our soil, but when policies are designed to govern these resources. Our voices must shape the agenda, and our rights to land, to health, to livelihoods, and cultural heritage must be protected at every stage. From a good governance perspective, a just energy transition calls for transparent decision making, fair benefit sharing, and effective institutions that can hold both government and corporations accountable. It calls for laws and policies that do not merely extract value, but reinvest it into the communities that make extraction possible. And it requires regional solidarity. As West African mining host communities, we share our common struggles and common opportunities in the face of climate change and energy transition, and we must begin to discuss this. This session that Charlize will lead in a few minutes is about empowerment. It's about equipping us with the knowledge, the skills, and the strategies that we need to engage meaningfully in the global energy transition agenda. It's about setting an agenda that insists on dignity, on justice, and on sustainability. It is about building a movement that ensures West African mining host communities are not passive victims, but active architects in our own future. Thank you for being Thank you for being here and for committing your time, your wisdom, and energy to this vital conversation. And when you think about the theme of the UN General Assembly this week of Better Together 80 Years and More for Peace, Development, and Human Rights, we had better be at the center of that and better laying our own agenda. So, very quickly, I'm going to pass the mic on to Charlize. Oh, my video has been off. I'm sorry. I'm going to pass the mic on to Charlize, and I'm going to let her take it from here, and then I'll come back towards the end. Again, welcome everyone.
Hey,
Talise.
thanks, Abby, for the warm welcome. Um, I just want to check the PowerPoint. Should I be sharing that or will someone on your side share? Sorry, you're muted.
I'm sorry. Would you like to share? I'll give you
Sure, let me share.
rights to do that. Yeah.
Um, and while I am sharing, I'll just introduce myself. You've done it already, but um, just to give a bit more insight. So I'm Charlize Thomaselli. I'm currently the research and learning facilitator at the Coalition for Human Rights in Development, which is a very long term for doing research, but also learning from communities. So at the Coalition, we strongly believe that research and learning is a two-way street, and we learn about the way that policy should be moved forward from our communities that we work with. All of you are mining affected communities, and so today is a session where it is an exchange of learning. I'll tell you what I know, and I will listen very closely to what you know as well. Um, Let me just put my password in for my computer so I can share. Zoom may not be able to record the contents until the screen is quit. Let's do that later. All right, let me try share again. There you are. Perfect. Okay. So today our session is it's the pre-Indaba session. And it's basically just to whet your appetite for the rest of the week as you move into the Indaba process, which I'm very jealous I'm not going to be able to attend in person. I think it's going to be absolutely fantastic. You'll be discussing all sorts of things over the next few days. And today we're going to get a little bit of a insight into the kinds of discussions that will be coming throughout the week. But we'll do this with a particular focus on JET, or the just energy transition. And it's going to be around about 2 hours, possibly a little bit more, depending on how much interaction and engagement we have. So if you do have a very important meeting happening in 2 hours' time, and you find this an interesting conversation, you might want to just think ahead and send a little note and say, I might be slightly late. Grab some water, grab some snacks, because it's going to be an interesting conversation for the next 2, possibly more hours. We'll start the first hour all together and we'll do an introduction talking about what is the just energy transition. What are the risks and opportunities for the energy transition with a particular focus on West Africa? And then looking at rights and policies that frame the energy transition, both internationally, in the African continent, and then regionally as well. The second part will move into some breakaway groups where each participant will have an opportunity to share their own experience. We'll be keeping the focus primarily on energy impacted projects. So if you are from a mining community that is not necessarily energy related, please feel free to share your experiences regardless, because extractivism is extractivism. The nuances change, but the realities are very, very similar. And in the last session, we'll start to articulate some of the resolutions about what the community demands and priorities are in terms of our just energy transition. And as I say, this is just the first opening webinar for the later Indaba. So we might not finish the articulating of the resolutions today, and that's perfectly okay, because over the next few days, you'll have more opportunities to do this. But this is a nice opportunity to start thinking about how those resolutions could be shaped and what priorities are important to you and your community. I'll move back into that later when we move into our second section, and I'll just turn this off. So to start with, what is the just energy transition? And I'm sure that this is a term that you have all heard in some form or another. Largely, the energy transition talks about the shift from fossil fuel use to renewable energy use. And the conversation is very broadly about saving us from climate change. We all know that the dependence on fossil fuel use has created massive implications for our weather systems, for our ability to produce food, for our ability to farm, and the severe weather events that are coming through, including hurricanes, tornadoes, severe drought. Africa is highly impacted by these climate change processes. The severe weather conditions are massively increasing on the continent, and very few of our states have the ability to survive the shocks of these massive weather events. The other side of that is that Africa has also contributed very little to climate change. The whole continent is only about 6% of climate change overall impact, with South Africa and Nigeria taking on the majority of that 6%. So the implications of causation are very unevenly spread across the world. It is not the global south that is creating climate change, yet it is the global south that is impacted the most by climate change. So, this energy transition is spoken about in a way that is trying to save us from climate change. And this is a conversation that we need to start carrying through for the next few days about what is Africa's role and responsibility in the energy transition. Should we be forced to stop using fossil fuels for the greater good? Should we be allowed to use fossil fuels because we still remain largely underdeveloped? Should we skip out on fossil fuel use entirely and just immediately move into renewable energy? What are the implications of renewable energy? How is renewable energy produced? What are the impacts of both fossil fuel closure and renewable energy increasing? These are all questions that we need to ask ourselves as Africans, as communities, and as activists, because there is no one right or wrong answer. It's very much about the perspective from which you find yourself in. So these are some of the conversations that we'll be having today and then over the next few days as well. We also need to talk about the environmental impacts of energy production. So, fossil fuel use, we know that has a very severe environmental impact. Drilling for oil, the potential of spills, and the environmental devastation that comes along with oil spills is very, very pronounced and very well known. As is the greenhouse gas emissions from fossil fuel burning, such as coal, gas, even burning wood produces large amounts of carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, and other greenhouse gas emissions, which does add to the overall global climate change, despite the fact that Africa is not responsible for climate change. But very little is spoken about when we talk about renewable energy impacts on the environment. Renewable energy is always spoken about as clean and green and non-problematic. And while converting the sun into energy via solar radiation or wind energy via wind turbines, that process is clean. That process is green. There's no GHG, greenhouse gas emissions, a part of that process. But everything up to that process does still continue to have an environmental impact. Critical minerals, which are the minerals that are used in renewable energy technologies, are still mined in the same way that any other mineral is mined. Whether you're mining gold, uranium, lithium, manganese, mining remains mining. You're either doing this through open cast mining or you're doing it through shaft mining. And both of these have massive impacts on local environments and international environments. In addition, the transport of these critical minerals to production areas adds in huge amounts of global greenhouse gas emissions. And in fact, the global transport sector is one of the biggest contributors to greenhouse gas emissions. The first primary is energy production. So we're talking about fossil fuel power stations. The second is transport of goods across the globe. Whether this is done via train, ship, car, rail, all of these have an impact on our global greenhouse gas emissions. Um, and then lastly, there is the impact on the lifestyles, livelihoods, and local environments of communities who live not only at the points of extraction, so not just where the critical minerals are being taken out of the earth, but where green energy is produced. So we're talking about massive solar farms, massive wind farms, and then there's other forms of energy production as well, including hydroelectricity, geothermal electricity, and green hydrogen as well. All of this kind of electricity production requires massive amounts of space. Communities are relocated and without compensation, they lose their livelihoods through subsistence farming and other forms of livelihood production in order to make space for these kinds of energy processes. And this is where the conversation becomes complicated. Because on the one hand, it sounds as though we're saying no to energy production because of the impacts it has on communities. But this isn't quite right. We're not saying no to green energy production. We're not saying no to mining necessarily. We're saying that both the extraction of energy and the production of energy needs to be done in a way that creates justice, that is equitable, and that importantly is community led, so that the process is not coming from high level policymakers, diplomats, and geopolitical states, but it's coming from the communities who are the most impacted by these products and by these processes. How can the communities not only benefit from the processes that are involved, but how can we use these processes to shift the status quo, moving away from extractivism? And extractivism, again, is a term that I'm sure many of you know already, but it's really good just to reiterate what extractivism means. And the best way to describe it is to talk about it in terms of extraction and extractivism. Extraction is to remove something, to take it out. To take a mineral out of the ground is extraction. But to take that mineral out of the ground in a way that creates livelihood damages, environmental damages, exploitation of labor, the exploitation of people's health, and the continual marginalization of communities is extractivism. And there's a debate, can extraction ever not be extractivist? I like to think that there is a possibility. I think that there are certainly ways and policies that can come into process to make extraction non-extractivist or post-extractivist. And again, this goes back to the community involvement, the community benefits, and using extraction to delegitimize the current extractivist, capitalist, exploitative status quo. West Africa plays a very central role in all of these discussions. We know that West Africa has served as a fossil fuel hub for many, many, many generations now. Nigeria, in particular, and the Niger Delta has massive amounts of oil exploration, but they're certainly not alone in the fossil fuel extraction of the region. Many other places also have coal, oil, and natural gas. And in terms of renewable energy, both the production and extraction that's needed for renewable energy is growing in West Africa. Lithium deposits have been found, bauxite deposits have been found, manganese is in Ghana, lithium in Mali, and this is just the start. We'll start to see more and more and more exploration rights being granted to transnational corporations coming in to do exploration for critical minerals. And at the same time, there's also renewable mega projects that are on the rise as well. Wind farms in Senegal, hydropower in Ghana, and new solar farms popping up across the region. Solar farms are primarily focusing in North Africa currently, but they will start to expand into the West African region any day now. And this is not unique for West Africa alone. This is the reality for the whole of Africa. Production and extractivism is increasing. And so this brings us to one of the first fallacies of the just energy transition. Well, the second fallacy. The first is that there's very little justice in the just energy transition. But the second is that there is an energy transition at all. This isn't actually the case. It is an energy expansion because, yes, there's an increase in the mining and exploration for critical minerals. There is an increase in producing solar, wind, and hydro production. But there is also an increase in many countries for fossil fuel extraction. And it's confusing because in some places like the Niger Delta, it seems as though foreign companies are pulling out of fossil fuel extraction. I know Total has already entered into some agreements to try and exit the country. And there's discussions that potentially the Nigerian government could be taking over and continuing with the process, but just under a different ownership. I think this is likely. I don't think that there is much chance that we are actually going to see an end to fossil fuel extraction. That doesn't mean it's not going to shift and change. It is. There are going to be changes. And some of these changes can be easy to predict, and some of them not so easy to predict. And again, it goes back to deciding what we as Africans and you as West Africans value in terms of energy production and energy transitions. Do you feel that it is important to continue with fossil fuel extraction? Do you feel it's important to end fossil fuel extraction? These conversations need to happen. When fossil fuel extraction does end, there's going to be processes. We've started a whiteboard. Thank you. There's going to be processes of mine closure and an energy power closure. And this impacts those communities who have been living nearby these spaces because many, many communities rely on fossil fuel production as a source of their livelihood. They either work in the mines or they work in the power process. So when we talk about the just energy transition, you can see how very multifaceted it is. There's different forms of energy, there's different versions and stages within energy production, from the extraction to the processing to the producing of energy. There are communities who are going to face lost livelihoods through coal closure. There are communities who are going to face lost livelihoods through critical mineral expansion. And there is environmental degradation throughout all of these processes, including the clean green energy. And so all of these multifaceted aspects of the just energy transition need to be taken into consideration and thought through very carefully. It is not a just transition if we leave communities behind. It is not a just transition if we simply replace one form of energy production with another form of energy production without dismantling the system that creates exploitation. And so going forward today, let's try to keep all of these different multifaceted aspects in mind through our experience sharing and through our resolution drafting. So I'd like to just get a few inputs from maybe about 4 or 5 different people answering the question, when you hear energy transition, what comes to mind in the context of your particular community? Feel free to just do the little hand raise, which you can do if you click on React. Uh, Enga, please go ahead. Inga Janet.
Thank you again for that wonderful presentation by you as an introduction. Energy transition or energy debate is a very sensitive one. And if you ask me, coming back from the meeting we had sometimes in Niger Republic, you'll find out that the heads of nations across West Africa concluded that energy can only be just because of the quantum of money that has been expended. Especially some countries are just coming up, you understand, with years of investment to see oil, that is fossil fuel. And you, just like you have rightly said, when you take this away from the people, unfortunately, I cannot start my video because we're in different time zones and I'm not properly dressed. So if you manage me, fine, but I think it will only be okay to switch it off. However, my short conclusion is also recognize the fact that it has to be just for it to be meaningful. And then whether we like it or not, there's I believe that there will equally be technological shift and innovations with time. So you cannot abandon that source of energy. Just like where, when we talked about the abandonment of coal and all that, some countries still went ahead with it. That is the greatest culprits. China and America never gave up. So holding down people's hands to say, no, you cannot, you just have to shift immediately to green energy and all that, I don't think is fair. So simultaneously, they should continue to develop while we continue to innovate, continue to increase the standards and continue to monitor to make sure that the impacts on climate change can be mitigated. But it has to be just, in my own opinion, for it to be meaningful, especially for those of us from the global south. Thank you.
Thank you. And actually, you just reminded me, I forgot one of my points about the just energy transition is in Africa is energy access. So a lot of the discussion is the assumption that everyone already has access to fossil fuel energy and that we're transitioning to renewable energy. But for many in the African continent, the reality is a lack of energy access at all. Never mind moving from one to another, it's moving from no energy to energy. And how this is done and the production of energy access, again, must be a community-led process because we talk about massive power stations that are being built to facilitate private enterprises, and communities who live underneath wind farms don't have access to energy. So energy access is another thing that we must discuss today. Is it Chima or Kaima? Apologies if I'm massacring your name.
That's Chima.
Kima, thank you. Would you like to go ahead?
Okay, Chima, please go ahead.
All right. Thank you. Good day, everybody. Sorry, I can't show my video. I'm in the restaurant. For me, a just energy transition will mean transiting to what we've always referred to as energy democracy, where the people determine the source and the type of energy that they want to use and be encouraged to develop such energy that meets their needs and is accustomed to them. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to share their interpretation of what just energy transition means in your community? We can always come back to the question at a later stage. So let's move on now to talking about the risks and opportunities of energy transitions. I've already spoken a little bit about some of the risks that are involved, particularly in terms of environmental risks and livelihood risks. And it's always easiest to think of it as in the thematics of what are the risks around fossil fuels, what are the risks about renewable energy, and then we've got a third column, which is other forms of energy. And in this third column, this is where I put hydroelectricity, green hydrogen, and geothermal electricity, because there are renewable-ish, but not necessarily renewable. There are other forms of electricity. And so I'd like to open the floor for additional inputs on risks around energy production in West Africa. And we'll open the floor for about 4 or 5 different people talking about the various risks. And then we'll talk about the opportunities as well, because there are opportunities here and we must seize those opportunities to make sure that the energy production, I don't want to say energy transition, but that energy production is democratic and community-led. Would anyone like to discuss any particular risks that their communities are facing, either in terms of fossil fuel, renewable, or energy alternatives? And this is going to be an interactive session, so don't feel shy.
Okay, let me talk. I mean, Sam is my name, and I work for ISODEC in Ghana. I always ask myself, can there actually be a shift or transition in energy? To be honest with ourselves, in Africa. Why do I ask this? In most communities in Ghana who are actually using solar panels, they say the panels are just for light. Beyond that, they can't use it for any economic activity. They still have to rely on the national grid to a very large extent, and several other energy options. So, in fact, indeed, even the level of awareness at the local level as far as energy transition is a problem. I recall when we went to the field and we're actually discussing these issues, someone actually asked a question that I actually reflected about. And that is actually based on Oxfam's thinking of shifting the ladder. It is clear that developed countries actually use fossil oil to actually develop to this level. If they have used that and they have been able to actually develop to this level, and they are asking us to discuss fossil fuels, how then do we actually develop? How do we actually make sure the industries are working? How do we industrialize and create jobs? How do we make sure that we are not actually trying to be like them, but we are able to actually unlock the huge potential in Africa, whose resources are actually exploited by these quote-unquote predators for their own interest? More often than not, most people think that we are always being dictated to by these Western powers and their financiers and investors. And the more we listen to them, the more we have problems. So the need for us to actually have a shared understanding and a shared appreciation of where we want to see Africa in the next 15, 20 years, and what energy requirements do we actually need? Do we think focusing on transition minerals and other forms of energy can actually help us to leapfrog to where we want to be? So honestly, the issue is not actually about transition. The issue is about actually energy mix, both fossil fuel and transition minerals going forward. Otherwise, we'll have this debate and we'll continue to have this debate for a very long time, and we might not actually get a solution to it as far as our own transition is concerned. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. You've brought up one of the biggest risks involved, and that is the risk of remaining a exporter of raw materials for the global North's energy transition. And currently, this is what is operating. This is how the status quo is moving at the moment. Africa is producing the minerals, the critical minerals, producing the oil, producing the coal, and all of this is being shipped straight out the country through initiatives like the Belt and Road, which is being led by the Chinese, through the Lobito Corridor, which is led by the United States, through the EU policies. Our minerals, our resources are going to the global north to be made into renewable energy technologies in the global north, not being made here. And then those renewable energy technologies are not coming back here. They're staying in the global north. And those who can afford to buy renewable energy technologies in Africa are paying absolutely massive amounts of money, which means that the general population is not getting it at all. So you've hit the nail right on the head there with that particular risk. I think we had Redzi next.
Okay, good afternoon to everyone. Our moderator, a great way to set the pace. Um, I had meant to speak earlier, but I was trying to figure out where the button for the raising of the hand was till AJ helped me. So thank you very much. I just wanted to say very quickly that we are in a dilemma of sorts. And I say this because at one hand, if you have been following the news, for instance, from Nigeria in just recent times in the few years that has come, while there is a lot of conversation around the need for energy transition, we are still celebrating finding oil traces or oil wells in various states that were not even in the Niger Delta, for instance, in Bauchi State and other states that were not the natural states for finding fossil fuels, which means that the posture of the country at this point in time, for instance, this country, is not, towards that transition mindedness, if I might say so. And of course, all you need to do is to have conversations around this country. They seem to be a very strong conspiracy theory, and somebody has mentioned it. I think the last speaker mentioned the being dictated to by uh, you know uh, sovereigns of Western economies that seem to want to suggest to the people around here that, well, they have done all their bit in trying to extract fossil fuels and have enjoyed great prosperity and developed their economies for so long. And when they decided it was transition time, they didn't care whether other underdeveloped countries were just finding their footing or were trying to develop their economies with the proceeds of these fossil fuels that they're extracting from the ground. And so, therefore, it brings up a very serious conversation as to, is Africa ready for the transition at this point? Do they need to have their own homegrown or regional timetable for fossil fuel or energy transitions that is going to take into cognizance, developments that attaining certain growth in their economies and their national growths before the transition happens? Of course, there's also the conversations around, what if we set a regime that looks at making sure that this extraction is done in such a way that it is not harmful to the communities that are actually bringing out, or the host communities of these fossil fuels and similar minerals as well, which has been something we have been speaking. My name is Redzi Jugo. We have been speaking in that regard with Global Rights, and a lot of the people are in the room now, about how about the communities being given the wherewithal and the enablement to be able to mine the right way, to mine in ways that are environment friendly, and they are responsive and responsible to the economy, to the environment as it is. Because, like you already know, in some of these places, like in Zamfara and some of these other localities, mercury is being used to mine gold. And we all know what mercury does to the environment. And Zamfara is one of the places where you have had a lot of lead poisoning and all of that. When you go down to Plateau State, I know people who have left their tailoring jobs, their farming jobs, and have all disappeared into the hinterlands, the bushes, to join the mining because they believe that the livelihood that you get from um, the mundane task, as they like to think of it now, is not taking care of their families. So it's about looking about the whole and being realistic about our context, our milieu at this point, and being able to say, can we also get people who organizations, governments who will be willing to invest in responsive and responsible mining practices that are going to be able to ensure that this extraction is done in such a manner that it does not leave the kind of deaths that we have seen across Nigeria and I'm sure in other African countries because of the kind of mining practices and the after effects that has been able to come to bear. We're talking about 300 ponds in Plateau State, 10 ponds that have, people have been able to believe that they're clean sources of water because the ponds were left there. But when they consume them, they may not have the effects immediately, but down the line, it has been shown that there has been a lot of after effects of consuming water from some of those ponds in those communities. And yeah, it has been quite devastating. So in other words, I've just tried to put together the initial question that was left on the table and some of these conversations that we're having now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rezi. You've brought up quite a number of important points, both risks, but I think you've also highlighted some potential opportunities as well. Some of the risks are the readiness of Africa to actually take on a technological transition, the industrial readiness of Africa, the fact that very few African nations have their own jet policies. I think it's just South Africa and potentially Egypt who have their own jet policies already in publication. And then the issue of finance and debt is a very, very big issue that we really do need to consider how we're going to handle this. Because if we're taking on loans to produce renewable energy production, we're never going to get out of debt. The debt that is already being paid by African countries to the global north is astronomical and quite frankly immoral. The fact that African countries are paying debt to global north countries is the ethics and morality of that are just not right. The amount of money that the global north has made through colonialism, through extractivism in Africa is in the trillions. And so quite frankly, they should just cancel all the debt that is owned and then pay back quite a lot of the money that they owe us. The reality of that is trickier to actually make them come through with it. But then talking about your opportunities, homegrown solutions, I think are vitally important. Ben, would you like to go ahead?
Okay, thank you very much for having me. I just had joined the conversation when you had started already. So at the initial point, I was trying to make sense of it, but just to make some contribution so that it could also flow in. But I'm trying to just learn this, and in trying to learn this of this energy transition, the situation first back home before talking about the risks is that Nigeria, the southeastern corner, well, we call it the south, Cross River State, Nigeria, southeastern corner of the country. So in Cross River State, we've transitioned, like many other parts of the country, from being a state or a city led by using kerosene. The kerosene was a byproduct of the PMS fuel, which was there a whole lot, while we were wasting our, burning our gas, all that. So somehow along the line, the transition took place as the subsidy on fuel was being removed. You just had numbers of households leaving the use of kerosene and gradually getting into using the LPG gas. So that is quite now widespread, especially in the urban centers. Yes, in the rural areas of the states, a lot of people are still actually cutting down wood trees, as their source of energy. But in urban centers, the transition from the use of kerosene and the use of even wood has taken place. At least, you could say 70% of households now use the LPG gas, which of recent we are told, some of us who are following issues on the energy sector, that is more cleaner than kerosene and petrol and all that. And we are also told that Nigeria has a bigger deposit actually of LPG gas, a much bigger deposit than crude oil. So the first instance is that we are being told that LPG is cleaner. So there's a transition to what seems cleaner. Yes, some people still use, even back that some partners have even promoted the use of charcoal, which is a byproduct of the forest. But the impact on the forest of using charcoal, I'm not yet able to get that. So you still have few people who are even promoting at this moment that charcoal is a cheaper alternative. So there's that kind of transition that a lot of people are in. So it's an urban rural divide. In the urban center, 70-80% use the LPG gas. Then the transition to using CNG, the compressed natural gas, has been a bit slower actually. From the point of removal of subsidy, the pressure on the government to bring up alternatives and make life easier made force the government to think about the compressed natural gas. And so in some major towns of the country, it had been deployed. In Cross River State, we don't have it really deployed, but some parts of the country have had it. But the transition from PMS to CNG has not been doing too well in the country. Okay, so the impression too is that CNG is a cleaner fuel and all that. So the government has an intention, has a policy to transition to cleaner energy, which is gas, because of the fact that Nigeria has a whole lot of gas, a whole lot of it. Then we have the gas that is wasted as byproduct of PMS, and then we have the gas that is naturally under the ground too. So it's the transition that we've not gotten a very clear-cut policy. We are still staggering. Even the LPG, yes, we recently, some plants have taken off in some parts of the country, meaning that more people, it's going to be cheaper. Maybe the price will go down and more people will use it. Maybe leave the wood and leave kerosene and others. So that's really where we are. Then the issue of the risks. Okay, I first thought was the risks of use, but I'm getting it that it's not just about the risk of use, because first is that a lot of times back, the impression was that if you use gas, it's more dangerous than if you use kerosene and other sources. So a lot of people ran away from it. But in actual facts, there are households that cannot afford the cylinder. So the risk is that they use very old and bad cylinder, and we have had cases of this thing risks to the homes and actually explosions in reality. Luckily, the incidences have not been too many, but the reality is that exists, and there are people who can't afford the cylinders. Okay, just like they can't even afford the gas. So there is the issue of that really prevailing. So people just buy something small, just keep going back to buy it. So let me stop there for now. I hope I get to really follow through very well. and bring the context of the corner of the Nigeria I am in, which is really not too affluent, a bit closer to the Niger Delta. And then I hope we make sense out of this and play our role in this issue of energy transition. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Ben. And again, you spoke nicely about both the risks and opportunities and how they intersect with one another. And the reality is that there are millions of people in Africa using very unsafe and unclean energy sources because there are no alternatives. People are cooking with wood inside of houses. People are cooking with other kerosene and other sorts of oils inside of houses, which is very dangerous and has a lot of health impacts. Shifting over to LP gas is a cleaner form of cooking, 100%, but keep in mind that that is still risky in terms of health if you don't have a ventilated room. So even cooking with LP gas indoors without ventilation has many, many health risks. It's certainly not conflict-free. But I think what you were trying to say is that with an energy transition, there comes the opportunity of people getting cleaner forms of energy, not only for cooking, but for other uses as well, that becomes more affordable. The more renewable energy production we have, the more affordable it is to use renewable energy. And this is true because we live in a market-based economy where supply and demand dictate prices. So if there's a huge amount of supply, then the affordability is improved, definitely. Ogichi, Ogichi, am I saying that right?
Yes, thank you. It's Ogechi. Yes,
Ogichi, thank you.
Yeah, so first of all, I still doubt that having gas as a transition fuel is the best, but that's not what I want to dwell on. I think that when we talk about energy transition and then we don't talk about cleanup, speaking from where I come from, and remediation of the environment that has been so damaged and so destroyed, from the extractivism, because it's not just extraction we do here in Africa that is done here, it's actually extractivism, which is why we have this problem in the first place, And then we can't even begin a conversation on energy transition without talking about how to fix the damage that has already been caused, by the way the fossil fuel has been operating here in West Africa, especially the Niger Delta. So, and then when we talk about cleanup and remediation and, paying communities for decades of, the suffering that they have been through, and then we can now begin to talk about access, because sometimes it seems to me like every solution puts the communities at a disadvantaged position. Every solution that we come up with, it's like it puts the local people, at a more disadvantaged position because majority of them do not even have access, number one. And now we're talking about transitioning, and yet the solar energy, for example, which is the one that many people are beginning to embrace from where I come from, it's not even affordable. You can only afford the one that you can charge your phones with. Communities cannot afford solar energy for business. So it's a difficult situation that I see ourselves in, and now we have to make a choice, to transit, which is a good thing, but we have to begin by talking about cleaning up and fixing damages done. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think it's an incredibly important point. One of the major risks is the continual extractivism without any rehabilitation, and that comes from extractivism, not from extraction. It's not just fossil fuel cleanup. So with the threat of fossil fuel productions closing and the threat of that environmental destruction not being cleaned up, there's also the threat of the fact that critical mineral mines are not closed properly. any kind of extraction project, whether you are drilling for oil, whether you are doing an underground mine for manganese, whether you're doing an open pit mine for lithium, any kind of production, extraction production, is meant to have a closure policy. You cannot get a mining right or a drilling right or an exploration right if you do not have a closure policy. But having a policy isn't enough. It often, even having the policy means that nothing gets done afterwards. And there are loopholes which transnational corporations utilize to get out of closing their production. Many of them will get to an 80% extraction rate, and then they'll sell the mine or they'll sell the oil rig for the last 20% because they know that that last 20% is expensive to get out. The deeper you have to go, the more expensive it is. So they'll sell it to someone else and then disappear. And then when that exchange, that transfer of ownership happens, something happens to the closure policy, it just disappears. Suddenly there's no more money for the closure policy, which is the first problem. The second problem is that closure policies basically say that you need to fill in the hole. They don't say that you need to rehabilitate the land. So if you have an open cast mine and you just push all of this, the overburden back into the hole, you've ticked the box, you've done what you need to do, you carry on and you move away. And this leaves soil that is so badly degraded, nothing will grow on it. And grass won't grow on it, never mind crops. What actually needs to happen is a process of rehabilitation where the holes are filled and then topsoil is created, compost is created, and the regrowing of indigenous plants is very important to bring back local biodiversity and then also to be able to produce soil that's healthy enough for crop production at a later stage. So you've brought up a very, very important discussion about the risks. Yet there are opportunities in this as well. The potential for creating jobs in rehabilitation process is massive. Huge amounts of labor is needed to rehabilitate the soil. You also need to have people who know about local biodiversity. And I like to always push that community knowledge needs to be central here. Communities know about this, the biodiversity in their particular area, and they can go in and advise what kind of biodiversity is needed in that space. There's also the potential for producing agroecological farming here. If you can get the soil to a healthy state again, you can create massive amounts of productive agroecological farmland. And for each agroecologist, you've got a whole family who's being fed. So there's a lot of potential and a lot of opportunity in production closure and mine closure. And then the other thing you brought up was that solar isn't strong enough to power industry. And you're completely right in that regard. Solar and wind is enough for the household use, but it is not enough for industrial use. And so this is something we need to consider. How do we industrialize Africa if solar and wind are not feasible? Do we use green hydrogen, which has its own set of problems? Do we continue to use fossil fuels, which has its own set of problems? How do we make industrialization justice-centered? How do we make it community-centered? How do we ensure that Africa can industrialize in a way that is not extractivist? Keep in mind the global north industrialized through exploitation and colonialism. And I'm really hoping that no one here thinks that that's a good strategy to industrialize Africa. So how do we then industrialize without that exploitative model? This is something we need to talk about. There was one last person who had their hand raised, and I see they've put it down. Would you like to jump back in?
Okay, yes, thank you very much. My name is Emily Ofodele. I just wanted to add my voice to the issue of just transition and the word just. I think if the word just is going to be included in the conversation, which ensures that everyone, including especially in the context of what the discussion we're having, host community, without leaving them behind. However, most mining communities as it is today don't even understand what it is that we're talking about when we see just energy transition. And why would I say that? They are not included in the planning. We haven't even gotten to the point of implementation strategy of the policy which you even spoke about. And I always will say my mantra is extraction in the context of oil and gas and mining starts from community and ends with community. And if they are not brought to the fore of the conversation, then it's not just in any form. And just like someone said, looking for a homegrown solution for us. Because as it is today, I'll tell you that there's a lot of coal mining projects going on that is, springing up for industrial use. Because just like we said, it's not the renewable energy of solar, is not being used. So most people are depending on coal in context for Nigeria as that. The gas that we have and the Nigeria is mining, or they're exporting it. It's not home used. So in that context, where do we start the conversation from? And moreover, even when you talk about the just energy transition, mainly in Nigeria, most of the conversation is being lied around oil and gas. But the mining sector is booming every day. People are coming in for license for lithium, for zinc, for tin, which are all components of the energy transition minerals. So where do we leave that conversation? So if we want to talk about it in holistically as just energy transition, both the mining and the oil and gas conversation must go in hand to hand, because the devastation done by mining is much more than that which is carried out with the oil and gas. We see that the oil and gas communities are still crying to date, which hereby oil and gas have started long time before now, even though mining was in session before the oil and gas oil discovery. But till date, the host communities of oil and gas that Nigeria had been benefiting from is still suffering. I don't want to go about, Redzi has spoken about the pits. There's so many pits dug and left unrehabilitated, or closure of mines to date. We still have all of those things. So the conversation has to start. The host communities, most of them are being, they are displaced out of, the kind of mining that had been done in their communities. More so that they are the ones that also do the things that they do. In Plateau State, they carried out the mining into residential areas in the city, and the state had to put a stop to mining at a point. So those are the kind of issues. And I think when we talk about the just energy transition, it really has to be holistic and not leaving nothing behind, from the planning to the implementation, and having to hear how we can amplify the voices of these communities. Thank you.
Yeah, I completely agree, Emily. And something that you brought up there, and I'm not sure whether you meant artisanal mining, that people are moving into artisanal mining.
Yes, I mean artisanal mining, because
Yeah.
artisanal mining is more major in Nigeria. It's more based. Nigeria is more artisanal mining than the mining companies. So we don't have the junior, or there are just very few of them.
And I think that's an incredibly important aspect when we talk about the multifaceted and multi-layered just energy transition, because artisanal mining brings risks, but it also brings opportunities. And
Absolutely.
in South Africa, artisanal mining is illegal, and we have a terrible term for artisanal miners called zama-zamas, which basically implies that they're all part of some mafiosa and that they're all criminals. And I find this very, very frustrating and disheartening, because mining is something, if you look at through the African archaeological record, and Nigeria is a very good example of this, how many centuries Africans have been mining for. It is part of African culture and African heritage to be miners. And so we need to find a way of bringing artisanal miners into the mainstream discussions and creating safety mechanisms so that they are not left unsupported without PPE, without proper equipment, without health and safety monitoring. We need to make sure that the people who are doing artisanal mining are safe in the process, and also that when they sell their goods, that they are able to get a fair market value for it. Because artisanal miners are making the least amount of money out of the process. It is the middlemen and the sellers who make the most amount of money. And in the same way that large scale extractivist companies, such as Total, such as Glencore, are all foreign owned and taking the majority of the money into the global north sphere, the same thing is happening with artisanal miners. Artisanal miners are selling minerals to middlemen who are selling them on to Chinese markets and European markets and American markets and Australian markets, and they are not getting the benefits out of this process. So I think you've discussed both a risk and an opportunity here that's vitally important, and that is the space of artisanal miners. Helen, would you like to be our last person to contribute to this section, and then we'll move on to rights frameworks after your input? Helen, would you like to go ahead? Helen, have we lost you? Okay, no worries. You can always come back in.
Okay, please let me just give us the insight while she's sorting out herself. Sorry for coming in. Since mining is an issue, it's important to bring to the house that in Cross River State, we are facing serious issues of mining. Persons from different parts of the country have, converged in some specific locations in Cross River states to exploit, issues of mineral resources. And practically all instances, they don't have any plan on how to, basically the closure plan that you're talking about is just not there. So in Cross River State, we now have locations that are highly devastated, communities traumatized because some of the people that come to these locations are armed, and the community is, thinking about how to defend itself, get into being armed themselves in order to defend itself. So we are having a mining crisis in Cross River State, and we are having a situation too where the federal government, that has the right to actually give licenses for mines, is also seeming to give license for mines in Cross River State. We have a situation where court cases have even started between a mining, company with the state government. The state government has been forced to intervene in the issue of indiscriminate mining of all manners of mineral resources. So, with the state government intervening, there's a task force to stop illegal mining in the state because it's a crisis, and the citizens are crying out, and the state government had to do something. But in one instance, one of the major miners, who is a politician, basically took the state government to court. In fact, arrested the chairman of the anti-mining task force, and that chairman was locked up for a couple of days. And when he was released, the state government and that task force faced faced the issue of being invited to court. So it is a kind of scenario. It's a problem in the states. It's a problem that needs global attention. In fact, some NGOs are trying to push that. The reports have been brought out on the situation. Field visits have been done by non-governmental organizations, but nothing is abating. The state government is trying, nothing is abating. This is mostly carried out by outsiders, but we are now having local players, with the instance that a major local player saw the opportunity in mining and decided that, look, the state government cannot stop them. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. I'm just going to
Yeah.
switch over to Helen because we do want to move on to the next section. And I see Helen is back online. Helen, would you like to make your quick input?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, for us here in Akwa Ibom, like communities in Ibno, we've been facing a lot of environmental damages caused by oil and gas activities. which providing alternative livelihood, training, and green job is very, very important. But at the same time, you make mention of closing policy loopholes in mining. For me, I'm just believing that many mining policies allow gaps that company exploit. Example like the tax inversion, weak environmental enforcement, neglect of community obligation. So to assist this closed loopholes, government should push for stronger regulation, which is helping to binding rules on cleanup, revenue transparency, and local content. I also believe in much advocacy on the civil society, watchdog, and community-based monitoring. Another thing is penalties and incentive, which helps to sanction for non-compliance, but tax breaks on carbon credit for firms, which helps in investing in clean energy. But notwithstanding as well, I believe that a just transition, which means closing mining loopholes, which harms communities, most especially if you come down to Ibano, you see that the environment is nothing to talk home about. You see a lot of health issues which have affected the communities, no good borehole water, and the people keeps on struggling, most especially the women and the youth. So I think before we talk about energy transition, before transiting, we should also think of how clean is the next transition energy going to look like. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Helen. That provides a really good segue into our next section. You're talking about how do we close loopholes, how do we create penalties and incentives, and how do we ensure accountability in a just energy transition. And there's a number of frameworks that we can utilize here, and I'm just going to run over just a very few of them because there's quite a lot that we can look in. But the main ones that we need to take into consideration is the free, prior, and informed consent stipulation that is become part and parcel of the United Nations declarations for Indigenous peoples. And Indigenous peoples is always a tricky term to use in the African context because most Africans are Indigenous, but Indigenous kind of has a different meaning in more colonial settings. Not to say that colonialism doesn't currently exist in Africa, it definitely does. Regardless, free, prior, and informed consent is a very, very useful policy that can be applied in multiple different processes. Free means that it is not your consent has not been coerced. It means that no one has been paid and no one has been intimidated. Your consent has been given freely because you feel that that is the right thing to do. Prior means that you need to get access to all the information before the implementation of a project. So this needs to be the very first step that a project engages the community in. Informed means that there is information on everything, all the potential risks, all the potential benefits, the entire process, how the entire process is going to be done. All of this counts towards the information. And then very importantly, and this is where the loopholes are created, consent. Consent is different to consultation. And what transnational corporations do is that they consult. And for them, consulting means they go to maybe one or two people in the community, generally traditional leaders, and they'll give some information over, and then they'll tick their box saying, we've consulted the community, and they'll carry on with their day. Consent and consultation are not the same thing. And it is every community's right to insist on free, prior, and informed consent. And if you have not consented to something, if you've merely been consulted, there is a case here to be brought out in opposition to whatever the project may be. This can be taken on at local levels, national levels, regional levels, and even internationally. This can be taken to the International Criminal jurisdiction. And so this is a very important policy that needs to be included for community capacity building. The second one is the African Charter on Human Rights and the African Charter on Human Rights. There is an entire section here that talks about the right to a healthy environment and development. This is a fundamental right of every every African citizen, the right to health and the right to healthy development. And the majority of nation states will also have a similar right somewhere in their constitutions or in their mineral petroleum resources policies. So getting to know what your country says about the right to health is important. Go through your own statutory policies and inform yourselves of what your country says. And even if your country doesn't say it, the African Union does. And if your country, which it probably is a signatory of the African Union, you've now got additional resources to utilize. There is the African Union policy on critical minerals. So this is a fairly new policy. It only came out towards the end of last year, or it might have even been the beginning of this year. And it's an updated policy that is being pan-Africanly applied. This is a really good policy on paper. It talks a lot about local beneficiation. It talks a lot about African trade. It talks about relationships in Africa to produce energy and supply energy for the benefit of Africans. It talks a lot about green industrialization of the African continent. And it talks about community rights in the policy. As we know, policy isn't enough. It actually needs to be applied. But I do encourage you to get hold of the African Union Critical Mineral Strategy. You can download it offline. There's quite a lot of useful information in that about the way of how you can try and hold states accountable. We also have the United Nations Guiding Principles for Business and Development. These are, unfortunately, they're not prescribed principles, so they're not mandatory, they are considered voluntary. This is a big problem with the UN guiding principles. The onus is for the impacted people to prove that the transnational corporation or the state did not follow these guiding principles. However, you can use it to go through it and see what the principles are and what the impacts are and what the suggested remedies are. There is a new policy that is being discussed at the UN currently. Well, it's been discussed now for 11 years. We're in our 11th year of the discussions. I'm hoping at some stage we move forward with it, which is the United Nations binding principles on transnational corporations and human rights. These will be binding so that all UN states will have to follow these principles. And if they don't follow these principles, then they can get taken to the international criminal jurisdiction cases. So if you're interested in following that, there's quite a lot of information online as well. It's always good to have more community backing these processes. One of the biggest gaps that we have is that what communities are saying and what policies are saying are not necessarily the same, and there's a bit of disjuncture between communities and policies. The more involved communities can become in high-level policy discussions, the better off for everyone. Because the communities are the people being impacted by these policies. So the communities must shape these policies. Otherwise, they're technocratic, top-down, global north-led initiatives, not very useful. But the good news is that the UN binding treaty is being led by the African Union, and they're being very, very vocal and very, very strong about their demands and about the wording of the policy to ensure accountability. And then there's other regional and national policies that do not exist currently in your countries. This is an opportunity for you to start investigating and shaping and bringing these policies in. So decentralized renewable energy production. This is where the state will no longer take control of producing energy, but allow communities to make smaller energy systems for their own benefit. These smaller systems can then be networked with other community network systems to create better stability in the energy production, and can also then be act as a surplus so that you can sell this energy back to the state. So it's useful because it not only provides energy for local use, but is a potential revenue producer as well. This doesn't exist in most African countries currently, but as we start to talk about the just energy policies, this is something you might want to start looking into to consider for future discussions, so that when you push Nigeria or Mali or Senegalese states to create their just energy policies, this becomes part of that policy discussion. And the last one is the growing, it's not a policy, it's a people's movement, but it's a growing movement across the African continent called the right to say no. This fits very closely with free, prior, and informed consent. Consent implies that you can say yes to something. It also implies you can say no to something. And this is vitally important because when we talk about development projects, it's always assumed the community will have to say yes to it. And the best that we can argue for is yes, but with some conditionalities. And while this works in some instances, because we're not against all of these projects, sometimes these projects are useful, but we want to make sure that the conditions look after the community, benefit the community, and follow through with all of the environmental and social impact processes. Some communities might not want that project to happen in their area. And so FPIC implies that you have the right to say no to a project. And this right needs to start being reinstated at a community level. And we really need to grow this people's movement of the right to say no. What happens with this is that it gives the power to the impacted community. If the community are the people deciding whether a project happens or not, the chances are the impacts will be reduced because the community can control them. The benefits will be increased because the community can control them. And if the community does not get the conditionalities that they want, they can say no to the process. So the people's movement of the right to say no, please look it up. If you need further information on it, you can always get hold of me and I can share the information on the right to say no. All of these policies are often violated. We know this. Accountability is something that we're struggling with across the continent and globally, particularly now more so than in the past, with the rise of right-wing fascism, the rise of dictatorships, and the rise of the very powerful billionaire elite who are dictating the terms. But that doesn't mean that we are hopeless in these processes. These policies do exist. New policies are being created, and we need to make sure that our voices are part of the discussions so that those voices are enacted. I always say it's not enough to give people a voice. People have got voices, people are saying what they want to say. It's enacting what those voices are saying that is the important part of this process. These policies help us to track impacts, to track where investment finance and development finance is being misused, and helps us to put pressure on the institutions that have control of these processes. So very, very important to follow through with all of these accountability mechanisms. And so I'd like to open the discussion now to, let's limit it to maybe 4 inputs because I am cognizant of the time. Let's open the floor to about 4 different people about your experiences of FPIC or one of the other policies that we've spoken about. Perhaps you've got a story about the right to say no in your community. I'd like to just get some sharing. Who have we got first? Nisikak? Nisikak?
Hello, Charlize. It's
Hi.
Nsika. Thank
Nisikak,
you.
thank you.
Yes. So very quickly, I just want to. My name is Nsika Peter Odofut. I'm from Cross River State. I work in Cross River State, and we had Ben earlier talk about the mining issues in Cross River State. So back here, there's a project we're running, the Strengthening Women in Mining project, and it seeks to empower women legally. It's a legal empowerment project. Want to empower women with the knowledge of the law, teach them how to use the law, and also how to shape some of these laws. So it's very interesting that you talked about the FPIC, you know. But one of the engagements we had, since we're sharing, I just wanted to mention that one of the women spoke about the fact that her community did not want a certain mining company or a certain person to come into their community and mine. And just because under the Nigerian law, the Nigerian mining falls under the exclusive list. That's what really dictates mining. She said that because they got licenses from the mining cadastral office, the communities did not have any right. At least that's what they were told. That because he has a license and it's a community land, and under the exclusive list, everything that falls 6 feet below the earth belongs to the federal government. And so the federal government gave this mining company that license to go there and mine, that the communities did not have any voice. So I think it's important that we start to talk about FPIC and how to implement it. And yes, talking about your, no, not yours, the different policies, you know, the African Charter and all that. I want to see how we can bring that and implement them into our local, you know, the local sector. So I just wanted to share that. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. The violation of FPIC is very, very common. And this is part of the discussion why it's so important, because communities need to understand that FPIC exists and that this is a right that is central to every country who is part of the UN, which is the majority of countries, and the AU is part of the UN, and the majority of countries in Africa are part of the AU, and so therefore are part of the UN process. So teaching communities about free, prior, and informed consent is a vital part of capacity building and advocacy at the community level. So thank you for sharing that. I think we have Kelly Chukwu next.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me and for all the conversations we've had. Yes, it calls for concern on how to bring the host communities in line with the agreements, the policies, and getting them involved in the process. But I have the concern, and that concern is that the problem of mining lies much on Africans, on the stakeholders at the community level, who have really twisted the CDAs they often enter to benefit them at the detriment of the larger society. In most of the communities we've visited, it's glaring that the problem of underdevelopment of poverty is not essentially that of the investor, because the investor is ready to do the right thing with the right push and the right nudge. But there are corrupt elements within the society, within the community, that that could negotiate for their benefit. And we've seen it across many communities. So bringing the host communities to be part of the process requires consistent and persistent advocacy, awareness creation, and sensitization. Most of the communities are ignorant of what the law says. Most of them are ignorant of what should be in a CDA. Most of them are ignorant of what they need to demand and how the mining in their host community should benefit the larger population. Unfortunately, the politically exposed persons, the stakeholders manipulate the whole process. So in calling for just energy transition, it also means that we really need to reconsider the power play at the local level to ensure that the vulnerable population are part of the process. And that could only be done when these things are open and done in a transparent manner. So we really need a lot of work to begin to sensitize the communities. And this conversation should be routine, should be regular. If not, even where the laws are made and they are perfect, and the investors are ready to comply, but they should, the powers that be at the local level, at the community level, will manipulate the process. And then the community will continue to reign in abject poverty. So that's my own contribution and what I want us to say. We really need to see how we can go into the mining host communities and create awareness, and not only awareness, and ensure that the larger percentage of the population are aware of what they should do and what they should gain from mining. Thank you very much.
You are completely right. I mean, community capacitation is the first step. It's the most important and vital step of the process. And I think you also bring up an interesting point about the corruption that happens at multiple different levels within the process. And this is partly why this is such a complicated system. We have captured elites, we have captured politicians, we have transnational corporations who are really only looking out for their bottom line and the profit margin. There are multiple different levels of human that we need to keep accountable in this process. And yeah, we've got a we've got a role to play in so many different spaces. But bringing communities into these discussions again and again and again is really just such an important aspect of how we start to move these systems forward, because we need to have the community voices, not only detailing where things have gone wrong and how things have gone wrong, but what are the priorities for communities and how do we make the system just? And I think that's the important aspect of policy building. Yuriki?
On everyone. So thank you for that webinar. I'm from Guinea Conakry. So I'm from a French country, but I will try to explain myself in English. I know that it will not be easy, but I will try. In my country, the energy situation is characterized by a dependence of wood and charcoal. So that is the first impact of that one. But the government trying also to implement a kind of electricity and solar powers in the country. So, but in my country, the communities are greatly affected by the mining project. More of the country is a kind of mining project, gold, uranium, iron, but all the community are impacted. The environment are very impacted. The kind of recurrence of disease, the violation of their land and human rights. As experience, we suppose lifetime a community to build their own advocacy. So this community fight against a kind of project they wanted to implement in the state is a kind of I don't know, good energy. That one, the communities they will help them to build their own advocacy. So at that time, I know that the community win. They win because at that time the government I'm sorry, the government don't allow the company to implement the cold energies. But at this time, for me, today, we need to think about how can we always support the communities for them to make a kind of advocacy for their own rights, and also how also help, because I need that it will not just not need to help the community, but also the government, community, all the NGO, they need to do a kind of advocacy and in front of the government, also with the mining company. That is very important for who want to help communities and people just to go from to access to what can I say, to access to transition energy. So thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. Mary, I'm going to ask you to be our last person to do an input on this section, and then we'll move on to the next section, which is an experience sharing. So everyone will have an opportunity to talk in the next session. Mary, would you like to go ahead?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity and for the discourse. It's actually coming at the right time. My name is Miri from Ziva Community Initiative, and based on our experience working with mining host communities, we've seen a lot of these challenges coming up from the miners, from the communities, and to be straight up, one of the things we've noticed is the fact that most of these communities are not even aware of these policies, and then the free, prior, and informed consent, which would have helped them in making decisions, in asking for their rights. They are not even aware of some of these. We've worked with a community where we're able to train some artisanal miners, and from our training, they were able to ask and demand for some questions from the mining community, from the mining company that came in to mine in their community. So the training was like an eye opener for them, of which, in as much as we've done that, but a lot needs to be done, because if these communities are not aware of what they are supposed to do or to demand for their rights, is actually a setback to the sector as a whole, and it actually deprive a lot of communities from development they're supposed to gain from mining activities in their communities. And also because the mining activity, largely, for instance, in Plateau State where we work, is dominated by artisanal and small-scale miners. So when you try to find a balance between these and mining communities, sometimes, and mining companies rather, sometimes it's kind of difficult because of the dominance of artisanal and small-scale miners. But it's actually a good one that, like it's been said, that it should be all informations and all artisanal miners and communities should be part of the process as a whole and not just a part. This will enable them know the right things to do. Yes, there are works that are going on, but more needs to be done so that we'll see a holistic result to the issues. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing, Mary, and I'm very glad to hear that you've already engaged communities with some positive outcomes. That's very nice to hear. So our next session, we're going to go into some breakaway groups, and Abby will tell us how the breakaway groups will work. But these are some questions that you're going to ask in your breakaway groups. You don't have to answer all of them. They're just some useful conversation thematics to try and get some feedback. There's only going to be 15 minutes for sharing, so please do try to keep your inputs concise so that each person in your group has an opportunity to talk. And then one person from the group will be chosen to then give feedback on the themes in your particular breakout session, give that back to the plenary group. So whoever our reporter is going to be, please note down thematics so that we're not going into huge detail about each person's experience, but rather talking about generalizations from your small group in total. So what kind of projects, what kind of energy projects are happening in your particular community? What are some of the impacts that those projects are having? What are some of the rights issues? Was FPIC applied? Have you heard about FPIC? And then some strategies. What are you doing as a community to mobilize, protest, advocacy, something else? And what are your visions for alternatives? We're not going to get through all of these questions in huge amount of detail today, but these are really good prompts to take with you over the next few days of the full Indaba, because our ultimate goal at the end of the Indaba is, what are your visions? What are your demands? What are your strategies? It's not just enough to list the impacts that are happening. We need to move beyond the impacts into coming up with solutions. And we can't do that until we know what our vision is. So please, can we move into our breakaway groups? Abby, will you let us know how that will happen?
Yes. Bumi, are you here?
Yes,
So
ma'am.
right,
Yes, the room is
okay,
open.
okay. So right now there are 5 rooms. We will leave room 5 for Francophone participants to be in room 5. Um, are you assigning people to rooms or you just want them to go in, Bumi?
Okay, so people can go into whichever room they
Room they
would.
want, but then to room 5 will be for Francophone participants. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, ma'am.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
So we have 4 English speaking rooms and 1 Francophone speaking room with 60 people. So my math is not good. If you're in a room with more than maybe 15 people, maybe jump out to a different room and see
Yes, please.
if
Yeah,
you can
if
spread
you're
yourself.
in a we will create one more room. So if you're in a room with more than 10 people, please join another room. You
Okay.
can join the rooms now. If you look, you will see the breakout room as opened, and you can join any one of 4 rooms. 5th room is for Francophone participants,
And
or you will see it written as French room.
we'll come back at 5 minutes past 4.
Which room am I getting into? My hair moving to where?
Who needs help getting into a room? If you need help getting into a room, just let me know.
I do,
Okay, I think I
please.
do.
Mrs. I don't know how to join the
Okay, all
room.
right. Well, I will try to assign you. Just if you just please hold on.
Okay.
Okay.
Please, Charles, please, room one, what are we supposed to be talking about?
So there are the prompts, which are what are the impacts? What are the projects in your community? What are the impacts? And what strategies are you using for advocacy? And what are your visions for alternatives?
Okay.
Does that make sense?
The impact, the impact and strategies for advocacy.
Yeah. And so it's projects, impacts, strategies, and visions for alternatives.
Okay, I said again. What are the impacts and strategies for advocacy, and what are the project vision to strategize for
Correct.
alternative, right?
Yes, correct.
Thank you. Oh, I can't go back to room one. It's not giving me that alternative here.
Yeah, do you want me to put you back?
Hello. Are we
Hi.
still? Okay.
You can still carry.
Where are we now?
You should be in the breakaway rooms.
Okay, okay.
Are you in a breakaway room?
Yes, I should be in room 4. Don't know.
Please add me to room one. I'm still waiting.
He's not back in yet. I'm not sure how to do that. Let me see what I can do. Emily, are you supposed to be in room 1?
Yes, I'm supposed to be in room one.
Okay, are you in?
No, I'm still here.
I don't know why. It doesn't say that you're unassigned. It says that you are assigned. I don't know how to move you if you are already assigned. It's confusing.
I'm sorry, how do we get into the breakout room space?
You should have just been gone in.
Should have been pulled in, yes. I was suspecting
Yeah.
that.
I'm not sure why you haven't.
No, you're giving me room 3. It's room 1.
I can't put you in room 1 now. Oh. It just says you're not joined. I don't know why. If you click at the bottom where it says breakout rooms.
No, I think because you're a host, you can see that. I can't see that from my end.
I can't see that from my end as well. I can only see chats, participants, reactions, share, record.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
I've moved you. Can you connect now? Can you connect? You in? Shima, are you in?
Chima is still here. She's still in the main room, and I'm also in the main room as well.
You said because I moved you. You're supposed to go in.
Gent is also here.
Who? Sorry, who's here?
James.
James, I'm sorry. I don't know why. I don't know why you've not been moved. I'm going to just move rooms and see if that helps. Is anyone else still not in a room?
Yes, I'm still here. I'm trying to see if I can get colleagues to put us in.
Okay, I'm going to try and move you to a new
I can
room.
only see Adosa. I can't see Bumi.
I'm going to move you to a new room. Let me know if you should get some sort of join button.
Okay.
You in?
Hello, Charlies. I sent you a message. Please check. I think the French room, they need you in the French. Yes.
Okay. Sure. Let me join now. Should we keep the breakout rooms open for another few minutes? Yeah. Hi, we are back in our main room.
Please, I'm not back. I lost my room. Can you help me, please?
Lost my way. I mean,
Everyone has lost their
We brought
room.
everybody back.
Everyone is back.
We brought
I thought
everyone back.
I thought I was the only one
Yeah,
that lost my room. I was trying
No,
to join back to my room and I
I'm
didn't
back.
say anything.
Since
The room
everyone
was
was having
timed.
too much fun, so
don't
we brought
continue coming
everyone
back
back.
to anyway.
Okay.
It's always a challenge to try and get through everything in a short webinar. And we're already longer than we had planned to be. But this is the way these things go. And just as a reminder, this is an opportunity just to whet your appetite for the rest of the Indaba. This is by no means the last opportunity you'll have to talk about the impacts and the solutions. This is just to kind of get the brain juices flowing for the next few days. So you will definitely have an opportunity to discuss further. But what we'll do now is, can we please have one representative from each group to give us a 5-minute feedback on what was discussed? And we understand that most groups probably did not have every person have an opportunity to talk. So just a 5-minute feedback, please, from group one. Who is our group one representative? So group one is Anas, Victor, Redzi, Helen, Jacinta, Emily, Chima, James. Would any of you like to give us a 5-minute feedback?
Or we just move to another group and come back to them.
We can do that. So group two
Because
is
we
our
just, we're not
Okay,
giving.
I'm here for group one. I'm here for group one.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry.
Can I speak up?
Yes.
Okay, although we didn't really have much time in group one because we're not able to get the question on time, but from my own little understanding, I think the project advocacy and strategies for what we could do is number one, advocacy and policy strategies, like policy engagement and dialogue. I believe organizing policy roundtables and town hall meetings between the community leaders, government agency, and extractive company is very important. And not sidelining any other thing, I think bringing in the regulators like the NUPRC is very important in this particular discussion, which we can be able to push for the adoption and enforcement of community development agreements and environmental laws. I also thought of the evidence-based approach where we can conduct participatory research, where we have community need assessment and environmental monitoring. We can use data as surveys, testimony. We can also use storytelling in also doing these. I also thought of the third one, which is capacity building and community mobilization, where we can train community members, CSOs, women, youth groups on rights, awareness, policy literacy, and advocacy skills. By so doing, we'll be able to promote civic education for grassroots communities to increase meaningful participation. Anyway, that's what I'm able. I also thought of accountability and transparency mechanisms. Maybe we can engage with platforms like extractive industries, transparency initiative, where we can track all revenues, allocations, and environmental remediation funds. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's a very comprehensive list. Group two is our Francophone group.
Oui, mon frère.
Go ahead.
Il y a plus personne qui reçoit maintenant, je ne sais pas si je vais lire en français ou bien je lis en quoi. Non, je
I
peux pas
think
faire ça en anglais.
you can
Non,
do
je suis
your.
pas trop pro en anglais. Ah bon? Ah, ok. En fait, la vision des énergies renouvelables dans la plupart des pays africains est justement basée sur les biomasses. Et l'objectif principal, oui, oui. Ok, ok, ça. Tu peux m'entendre, s'il te plaît? Je peux y aller? Je peux y aller, s'il te plaît? Ok. La vision des énergies renouvelables, c'est de réduire la dépendance aux énergies fossiles et à la biomasse. Tu peux? Tu peux transcrire, tu m'entends, s'il te plaît?
Please continue.
Je vais
For
seulement, après
English
tu vas transcrire,
speakers,
alors ou bien tu
just
prends note,
press the
après tu transcris.
translation
Donc, c'est bon.
button.
Non, je veux que tu le fasses au fur et à mesure pour qu'on gagne en temps, ou bien tu veux que je parle, après tu... Ah, ok, ça marche alors. Ok, ça marche. Ok, ça marche. Merci beaucoup. Donc, je disais, c'est de réduire la dépendance. Ça marche. C'est de réduire la dépendance aux énergies fossiles et à la biomasse pour atteindre une production d'énergie plus propre et plus durable. L'objectif, par la contribution déterminée au niveau national, vise à réduire 30% d'énergie renouvelable d'ici 2030. Cette vision inclut le développement des projets hydroélectriques et les projets solaires, surtout l'électrification rurale et la création d'emplois dans le domaine des énergies renouvelables. Les sources d'énergie renouvelables sont l'électricité, le solaire et aussi les déchets. Les défis résident dans le manque d'infrastructures et aussi le besoin de soutien financier et aussi technologique. Donc, je crois qu'en grand mot, c'est surtout ce qui est en termes de défis, de vision pour d'ici 2030. Je vous remercie.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Group 3. Anyone from room 3? Bashira, Melody, Mercy, Blessing, Grace, Damilola, Ndukwe, Mohammed, or Abaddon. Would any of you like to go? Should we come back to group 3? Anyone from group 4?
Okay, for group 4. My
Thank
name
you.
is Daniel Abba. I am ED for Environmental Protection and Care Support, EPCS, and I'm representing group 4. Unfortunately, we didn't have so much time. However, we had a few discussions and I will present now. We try to look at the scenario as regards our experiences. The mining communities are largely unorganized and uninformed. The miners are also mostly artisanal and small-scale miners. Both the artisanal and small-scale miners and the communities are uninformed about the policies. And so they are easily exploited. The artisanal miners, when they mine, they carry their minerals. In many cases, they don't even know the value. And the big exploiters, because in most of the time, the artisanal miners have some big boys behind them who buy off when their minerals, and they buy them at very cheap rates. And then on the side of the communities are not organized. As a result, what the miners do is at point of entry, they go to meet some of the representatives, some form of leadership in the communities, mostly the chiefs, give the chiefs some money, and then they go into mining. There is nothing like informed consent. As a matter of fact, the community, as it were, is not even well aware of what is happening. This approach has led to crisis among communities, both inter and intra-communal crises, with communities laying claim to various mining sites and leading to so much crisis that houses are being burned, people are killed and maimed, and governments are responding by banning mining in some states. It has happened in Benue, it has happened in Kogi, it has also happened, I understand, in Plateau. So our recommendations are that communities should be organized. And especially community development committees should be set up within host communities. And these committees should be trained. Their capacity should be built to be able to manage conflict, to be able to engage, and they should also know some of these policies also should be introduced to them, and they should be also linked to regulators and sources of help. And then we also say that that mining should be removed from the concurrent list so that states can have powers to take decisions with respect to mining. That way, the peculiar cases with various states can be easily resolved. So I think those are the points that we have raised in Group 4. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone going back to Group 3 who wants to contribute?
Yes, Group 3 is here.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. So my name is Ogechi Okanyakoki, and I'm with Hensat University, and also a research consultant with SDM. So my group, we didn't have so much time, but we were able to tackle like the 5 questions. The first one being the projects happening in our community, and we identified 2 major projects, and that's oil and gas, and then solar projects. And then so this other question of how they are impacting land, water, livelihoods, and health. Well, of course, the oil and gas projects, the impact is well known, and it's been negative for the communities that we represent. It's been largely negative, affecting land through oil pollution, affecting farmlands through oil pollution, affecting water in such a way that the fishers are unable to carry on with their livelihood activities and are venturing into some other negative, activities, including piracy. Some of the fishers have been suspected to be engaging in pirate activities because they no longer have their source of livelihood, which is fishing. So that's one of the impact. Then on the positive side, the solar projects have been impacting the communities in a very positive way. For instance, one of us mentioned a solar-powered water scheme, which has made it very easy for has been able to ease the water struggles of the community people. And then there's the street light project, solar-powered street lights, which the communities have been so delighted in, and praising the project implementers. And then for the other question on have your rights been respected, the FPIC, we gather that it's a little bit complex because of how the communities are designed. The okay, so they have clans. They have clans in the Niger Delta and some other parts of the country, and they have what they call the villages, the clans, or the community. So most times you hear about a particular community, it's not just one community. It's a clan, different communities. And then they have the mother community, the parent community, and they have the smaller communities. And sometimes it appears that it is the mother communities that take decisions or that give this FPIC. But then, what are the smaller communities, the rulers or the leaders of the smaller communities do not feel that this is enough. They feel that they should also be consulted, but they aren't often consulted because every decision is taken at that level of the mother community, and they are just there, not really, and most times the communication doesn't really flow down to them early enough for them to be able to know if they will give their support or not. And so about the strategies, it has been advocacy, mostly advocacy, which is championed by most different civil society organizations. And then there's also research, the kind of research where the host communities are co-designers and participants, not just respondents. This kind of research somehow brings healing to the communities because they're able to speak, they're able to assess and reassess things happening in their environment and then take certain decisions. And then about the vision at this point, we didn't have much time to explore the visions, but then we thought that part of what we are looking into, when we look into the future, we see the possibility of communities that didn't really have access to energy, having access to the right energy, because they have already embraced, the idea of the transition. So the access to energy, it's in the right direction, like having access to clean energy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that input. Group 5.
So I will speak for Group 5. My name is Koko Udo. So we looked to the question, despite of the fact that the time was very short, what projects are happening in your community? So for coming from Niger Delta, it's basically oil and gas. And how are they impacting land, water, livelihood, and health? So without being looking for something to say, it has been negative in the sense that a particular community like Isinobulu, they don't have good drinking water. Their farmland is constantly polluted by bursting of outdated oil pipelines run to the area. And then two, the community is also helping because I remember 5 years ago, we wanted to go in there to do something to create awareness for the citizens to demand for their rights. I lead that project. A day two, I had received a message from DSS that the community is not conducive for us for security reasons. We should stay back. We understand that was orchestrated because they never wanted those people to know the truth or know what they should ask for. So even as we are talking now, advocacy in some areas will not work because the benefit captures. Those who are gaining from what is happening now will not allow you to know the truth, fight for their rights. So that way, it stops us from going. Now the point is that if I had gone with my team, what would have happened to us? It would be like as if we did not follow the intelligence report from the DSS. But the point was that it was not basically because there was problem, but those people behind didn't want us to tell the community people, this is what you should demand for, this is what you should look for, in a non-violent manner, because we're not supporting violence, but that did not happen. So the next question is, how have your rights been respected? Well, without being told, many times it is not, because based on what we discussed earlier, we've mistaken consultation to consent. Many times the benefit captors will sit and say, yes, come and do whatever you want to do. So when the youth and the women are complaining, maybe protesting or trying to do anything to react to what they are facing, they will now use the security to calm them down. That's happened many times. They start shooting or beating them up, and then they will go away because You can't fight with your bare hands. Then the last one says, what strategies are you using? Protest, advocacy, negotiation, alliances. I want to say this, believing that maybe in the future it might hold water for us. The first one will be for us to look at the issue of community rights and consent. We want to ensure that communities have the right to say no or negotiate terms without being coerced or without being intimidated. In some other instance, I went to a community in a meeting like this in Connecticut. We managed to present because the idea was that we are coming to enlighten the people. So if they are right to have information about how their environment should be maintained for them so that the next generation will see it is not guaranteed by the government, either from the subnational or national level, we may still continue to talk. Another point is that meaningful stakeholders engagements. I think we should move away from having the same set of people who will speak for us, we the people. How can two people be we the people for a community of more than 2,000, 3,000, 5,000 persons? So information must be accessible in local language and in format that the people can understand and then say, this is what we want. The number 3 strategy we think that will be okay is that social ownership of energy. Well, the mining companies needs to take care of the local people in terms of development. It's not about them coming to get the resources, give them the percentage to the, maybe through joint ventures to the national government, and the national government will now give percentage to the state government, and the state government can even concentrate using the money within the way it should not be used mostly. I'm not saying it shouldn't be used, but mostly. And then at the end of the day, the place is abandoned. And somebody made mention of Lebanon. Lebanon is an eyesore. Now they are trying to use 3% of the CDT to do something, but we are just hoping that maybe over time they will be able to come out of it. And then the final strategy is that fair benefits sharing. It must be managed carefully to avoid creating internal divisions. The question is, why do we always have wasted people? They are not wasted by their very nature. It is out of their the injustice. You see, you go to a place that you have the oil exploring or exploited, and then they don't have good road, they don't have good school, they don't have good hospitals, nothing is good. And you expect those people to be smiling. Are they zombies? They are not. So in order for the communities to have peace, when there's no justice and injustice prevail, whatever thing you see to be peace is not peace, it's forced, it's fake. So there was need for the community people to own and benefit in real time. That way there will be peace in that community and development. Thank you. That's all that we'll be able to gather in a short time.
Thank you that's a very powerful input. And something you brought up, which we did not discuss earlier in the risks and opportunities section, but something that is very important, is the risk of reprisals, the risks of what happens when communities stand up to create justice in the energy transition. This is a risk that needs to be taken into consideration and thought through very carefully, and about what support mechanisms there are to defend communities who are at risk of reprisal, and also to ensure that policy takes risk into account so that policies are preventing risk from happening. And then if risk does occur, that there is remedy for this kind of process. So something to take forward with you over the next few days as well. Thank you everyone for sharing your inputs. And my apologies that it's a short time, but by no means the last time to talk about these things over the next few days. We're going to move into one final breakaway section now. And we're going to, let me share my screen for you. So moving it forward now into a little bit more articulation about the resolutions. So in this last conversation, there's quite a few resolutions that people have discussed already, and that's fantastic. But let's take a little bit more time to think these through a bit more carefully. So what are host mining communities' demands? And it's not just demands, I mean, all the demands are relevant. Let me try to rephrase that. But how do we ensure justice in the just energy transition? What does justice mean to you at your particular community level. And this is important because we want a variety of interpretations of justice so that every person's perspective and every community's perspective of justice is brought to the forefront. So we'll move into the same breakaway groups as before. We're going to discuss what should mining host communities demand to ensure the energy transition is just. And then when we feed back, we'll group them into particular points, if it's land rights, benefit sharing. And if we have time, we can talk as a group about whether we agree for these or not. The idea was to have a set of drafted resolutions by the end of today, but I don't think that's feasible given the time limitations. So I think let's shift that output for the end of the Indaba, coming up with a set of agreed resolutions by the end of the Indaba. And this again is just an opportunity to start thinking through those resolutions. So as you move into day one of your Indaba tomorrow, it's already sitting at the very front of your mind. These are the resolutions we're fighting for. Okay, so the action here is please go back to your breakout group. Is anyone stuck without a room? Does anyone need help getting into a room?
Hello?
Hi, do you need help getting into a room?
We finished?
We're
Hello?
moving to the breakout rooms. Do you need help getting into one? Welcome back, everyone. I hope that despite the short time, you were able to have some useful conversations in your groups. So we'll just go through the 5 groups again. Please prepare yourselves. You know which group you are in. So we can have one person give us a short feedback summary from the various discussions. And again, don't worry if you didn't get through all of it today, there's still time in the next few days to do this. So let's start with group 1, please. If you could give us your very succinct feedback.
Okay, thank you, Redzi Jugo, once again. Sorry, Initiative for Peace, Justice, and Development. The group was able to come up with a few things. I'll quickly run through them one after the other. One, it spoke to the mode and the method of consultations with the host communities. It was made very clear that the consultations are merely perfunctory. People do not, the companies are not out to really get anything from the communities. What they try to do is to orchestrate town hall meetings and make sure that they teleguide what conversations are happening there. So the meetings at the town hall meetings are not as meaningful as they should be. They're not as impactful because they do not touch on the real issues that the communities want to have conversations about. So the sense of justice will come from a place where both the regulators, political leaders have a sense that the people at the grassroots are in the same room and are having conversations. We had that from Mr. Chima, who started the conversations. Helen Ayo spoke to the fact that even though they're trying to set up, yes, the concept around green energy, around this transition energies that they're trying to get, they also need land to be able to do so. But when they come to ask for land, it's also a guise to engage in land grabbing. So there's a lack of transparency in even getting the land needed to be able to set up infrastructure for green energies, and that needs to be checked. People need to really check about that. Mr. Wabweze also spoke largely to the issue around consultations and the lack of transparency where that is concerned. Of course, the concept of that, some of the reasons why we don't get the real issues at the grassroots is because people are really hungry. So if they get the kind of help that Emily and her group are doing, which is to ensure that they give them empowerment, if there's a tilt towards empowering the local communities, and they go to those meetings with less hunger than they should ordinarily have in their bellies, they're thinking more long term than the short term. If you're thinking long term and you're not so hungry, you're thinking about the next generations and what they can benefit from that conversation. Of course, Mr. Chima also added an extra letter to FPIC, not just prior informed He also added obtained, since some of the times it is not obtained. It is consultancies. It is a monologue, so to speak. They speak over your head. They tell you what they want, and then they leave. What about we seeing that it is actually constructively obtained by the individuals to be able to see that something happens? This was the size of our conversation in group one. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's not free, prior, and informed consultation. It's free, prior, and informed consent. There's a difference. That's really important. Francophone group, please remember to turn on your translation if you are an English speaker.
I lose my English speaker. Who will translate for me, please?
Are you going to speak in English?
No, I'm going to speak in French.
Yeah.
Like this. I think that I can really explain myself good at French. So I would try.
That's fine.
So if somebody can help me to translate it in English. Please.
Yes. Is our translator still with us?
I don't know. Where is my translator?
Is the translator still here?
Ok. Ok. Je crois que de façon générale, essayer d'aborder le sens de la transition juste. Nous savons d'autant plus que l'exploitation des minéraux transitionnels demande véritablement une approche qui soit fondée sur l'équité et la justice. Les approches fondées sur l'équité et la justice sont essentielles pour financer la transition énergétique. Alors, pour moi, il faut véritablement trouver des principes directeurs qui peuvent véritablement garantir une transition énergétique mondiale qui puisse profiter à tous et surtout aux communautés qui sont riches en minéraux essentiels. Ainsi, non seulement les pays en voie de développement en tant que partenaires de la transition juste peuvent profiter du développement grâce à des opportunités de la chaîne de valeur et du partage des bénéfices. Ainsi, toutes les communautés et les entreprises pourront trouver un bénéfice équitable dans l'accès aux énergies de transition. Ainsi, il faut plaider à des contrats en faveur des contrats équitables et transparents. Il faut aussi plaider pour une gouvernance.
S'il vous plaît.
Oui.
Casimir, if you're here, please unmute. We can't
Moi,
hear you translate.
Moi, je me mets en mode mute.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Je peux reprendre ou bien je continue? Allô? Can I go back or I can continue, please?
Continue, s'il vous plaît.
OK. Donc, il faut plaider en faveur des contrats équitables et transparents, plaider pour une gouvernance solide et une équité équitable pour garantir des partenariats commerciaux et des investissements justes en faveur des communautés. Ainsi, dans le cadre de la justice, les communautés peuvent demander l'accès aux droits pour diverses situations, incluant la justice pénale. Peut-être une aide dans le cadre pénal, si les communautés se voient impactées sur l'aspect pénal, ou une justice civile, soit par le paiement de dommages-intérêts, l'assignation en réparation de dommages, et aussi l'accès à des justices de conciliation coutumière. Il peut arriver qu'à travers les grands projets de transition énergétique, qu'au sein même de la communauté, qu'il y ait des conflits liés à des conflits litigieux, liés aux problèmes de terre, aux problèmes de réinstallation, aux problèmes d'indemnisation, et trouver des formes de justice, de réconciliation à la fois traditionnelle et coutumière pour empêcher en fait tout ce qui est lié à ce qu'on appelle les conflits les conflits lignaux liés au droit d'accès à la terre. Je vous remercie.
Okay, no problem. No problem. Thank you. Group 3. Would anyone like to speak from group 3? Group 4?
Okay, so once again, my name is Daniel. I'm of Environmental Protection and Care Support, EPCS, and I'll be speaking on behalf of Room 4. So we identified a few demands that we think the mining host communities should ask for to ensure that energy transition is just. The first thing is that they should demand their right to have a voice, to be recognized as part of the stakeholders, and to be able to say yes or no. They should also demand for participation in policy formulation, in the process of selection of miners, well, in the case of companies, in the decision of what the compensation should be, and how the impact on the communities will be ameliorated. They should demand for knowledge on the existing policies, their rights under the mining regulations, the impact of mining activity on the host communities, and then in the case of artisanal miners, they should demand that artisanal miners be organized into groups, and for them to operate in the communities, they should be compelled to be members of those groups so they can be held accountable. In the case where community is being compensated with projects, the communities should be part of the decision on which project should be implemented in their communities. And they should participate in the implementation of those projects.
Thank you very much.
So that is all from Group 4. Thank you.
Going back to Group 3, is there anyone from Group 3 who would like to contribute?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so for Group 3, we came up with a number of resolutions what communities are demanding from our experiences. And the first is adequate compensation for losses suffered by communities as a result of mining activities. And then we spoke about ensuring fair benefit sharing from mining revenues. You know, there should be like direct allocations to communities, you know, when it comes to this revenues from mining. And then a commitment to restoration of polluted lands and water bodies with remediation plans that are enforceable, not just on paper. And then, of course, strengthen and implement measures for environmental protection, have these independent monitoring mechanisms on ground. And then we also spoke about carrying out sustained sensitization, not just a one-off thing, but sustained sensitization and awareness programs for communities, on their rights and obligations under the mining laws. They should know, Then also to increase accountability and transparency, especially in revenue flows and environmental compliance. And there should be, access to public reporting, to records about mining activities. Community people should have access to reporting on these activities. And then there's we also came up with communities would want their not just their rights as stakeholders, but they want to have rights as shareholders. They want ownership rights. They want to be involved. They don't just want we coming to seek handing projects over to them, but they want to be involved as owners, not just as beneficiaries or something. And then we also talked about, of course, full and meaningful involvement of those communities. And then the last thing we talked about was incorporating the FPIC language and principles into the Nigerian Mining Act, which is currently under review now. Yeah, that's it from our group. Thank you.
I like the very strong language you're using in a lot of those demands. That's really good. And there's a lot of various layers that you're doing, that you're taking into consideration. That's really great. Group 5.
Okay, let me represent the group once more. My name is Kukurudo. So after brainstorming, we came up with the following resolutions that can help the mining host community to have a just transition. Number one has to do with the demand for active participation. So they want to move away from passive observers to being active participants. That way, they move away from a mere consultation to co-creation. They are now co-creators of the plan, whatever is going to happen in their community. They are ab initio, they should be involved. That way, they understand it. And then that also places on them the right to say no if, after their well-informed position is that this project is going to be inimical to their well-being, to their society, they can say that no without fear of molestation. Number 2 demand is that they will also look at economic equity and development. What do I mean? They want to negotiate the work, what's going to happen, how are they going to benefit? The royalties, what is their percentage? Ab initio. Equity shares, can we buy into this? Can one of us also be a part of a shareholder in this? Local hiring arrangement. If the company will absorb 100 employees, how many can come from the community? Bearing the fact that they have capacity to occupy any position. And then they also demand, that's number 3, they demand for social investment as local infrastructure development. Like I said in my first presentation, imagine a company drilling oil, maybe giving royalties to the government. Then you go there, you don't have a good school. The school is nothing to write home about. The hospital, nothing to write home about. No drugs. And then even the market and other things like that have been destroyed. So they have to have that in black and white, that this is what you are going to do for our people. Doing that in itself adds to social development of that place. Then number 3, depending on the company's size and type, we talk about value addition. Why should we be exploring or producing oil? Until recently, Dangote started refining our crude. We were buying these things. When we send out crude oil, is it the only thing that can come back to us, petrol or what we call PMS, and perhaps diesel? What about other end products, other products? So if it's possible for the company to excite the company that will now finish the product from raw to finished part of it, that value addition will also help because it's going to employ more hands, provided it's not environmental harmful. Number four, we want to, the demand is that they should also know if it's possible. I think it's possible for them to know about the beneficial ownership register. Because many times a foreign company will come to this place in the name of foreign, but it's owned by our local persons who front other people to deal with us. So that when these people are trying to follow international laws in terms of operations, it becomes difficult because our own person, perhaps the highest shareholder, now dictates how it should be run, how the environment should be, the community should be taken care of. So they should demand to see who are the shareholders and what percentage, so that they now be able to negotiate from the point of fairness. Not somebody come to say it's my land and I'm the one that has this, do this. So that's another demand that we think the community should look forward to. Then in terms of environmental and social protection, yes, we want to move away from a mere do no harm to how does this thing create shared value to the people? What happens to our body of water, land, biodiversity? They have the insist on that. What is your pollution control? What are you going to do to control pollution? It will happen. That way, they ensure a community that is healthy and water is safe. Nobody sacrificed for money. And then number 6 is that's number 7. Workforce and long-term security. Okay, what happened to our own people are working? Casualization is not what they want to see. Somebody can work in a company for 3 years, still a casual staff. No, that should not be accepted. From day one, what is given to the hand should be given to the guests, right? Whatever benefits the people that you're bringing in as expatriates enjoy, these other people should also enjoy. That way, the community people will be happy without compromising safety and well-being of the environment. I think that's the reason that we were able to gather because of time constraint.
Thank you so much. So I've got 2 full pages, 2 foolscap pages listed of demands, and I'll write these up and I'll share them with Abby for your future discussions. But there's a lot being said here, and a lot of it is looking at making the demands precise. And I think that's the right thing to do. It's a very, very good thing to do. It's one thing to say we must ask for justice. But what is justice? What is justice to us as a community? Because justice is not necessarily the same in every community in every part of the world. So coming up with very specific ideas of what we want to demand is very important. Also, if you go to a company or you go to a government and you say, these are our very, very precise demands, it's harder for them to fob you off. If you speak in generalized language, it's much easier for them to fob you off, because they could say, oh, well, we are doing better participation processes, and they might be doing it by 1% better. There's no real difference in the way they're doing it, but on paper it looks better. But if we're very, very clear of what we think good participation process is and what a community-led beneficiation strategy is, then it's much harder for them to fob you off. So this is a very brilliant first start to the process. And I thank everyone for staying around for so long. I realize we're very over time. We are now done. I would like to just finish off with a last slide, which is my favorite quote of all time, from Jason Moore, who is a post-colonial and post-extractivist scholar. And he says, shut down a coal plant and you can slow global warming for a day. Shut down the relations that made the coal plant and you can stop it for good. And I love this quote because it speaks to the heart of what a just transition is. Replacing fossil fuels with renewable energy is not going to stop the systemic exploitative processes that have shaped Africa's politics, economics, and social life. The only way for us to create justice in an energy transition is to shut down the relations, the exploitative, capitalist, colonialist relations that have created the energy crisis, the climate crisis rather. The climate crisis is a direct result of colonial exploitation of the global south. And so when we move forward in our just energy transition demands, that needs to be at the heart of it. that we are bringing back emancipation, power, and justice to the communities who are most impacted. And this is one step towards achieving that goal for us all. So thank you so much for sharing the last 3 and a bit hours with me. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I hope that we all stay in contact, and I can't wait to hear the final resolutions that come out of the Indaba.
Thank you so much, Charlize. A round of applause for Charlize, please. If you'd like to unmute and applaud or use the
Thank you so
emoticon.
very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We are grateful.
Thank you, everyone.
Well, yes, thank you so much, Charlize. This was really, really good. And to let you know how good this was, there's still 40 people in the room after 3 hours. That's amazing. A lot of the people who would have loved to join or already started to travel down. For those who are joining the Ndaba physically, have already started to travel down, and they were not part of this meeting. But this meeting has set the tone for the 5th West African Mining Host Community in Ndaba that starts on Wednesday. I think there's another pre-event tomorrow evening. But this has set the tone. This is as whet appetite for what do we need to think about over the next 3 days, so that on the 3rd day, when we come to the resolutions, we're very clear on what we want and who we address what we want to. The UN General Assembly is going on in New York this week. I've always been cynical about it because I really feel that the voices of the people who should be in the room are not there. The people whose lives are really at stake are not there. It's the businesses, it's the governments that are that are beholden to the businesses that are there. It's civil society organizations, largely from the global north, that are there. But the people who are impacted by climate change, whose lands have been taken for green energy, whose heritage are being destroyed by the pollution and the degradation from mining, are not there. But we're in this room. We have created our own table. We will amplify our own voices. And that's why it's very important for you to be part of the Indaba and ensure that your voices are heard. So again, I'd like to say thank you, Charlize. I will catch up with you after this. And thank you to every single person who's made this meeting, and especially for those of you who stayed till the end. 3 hours on Monday is a big deal, and I do not take that for granted. So thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. See you on Wednesday.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Okay, see you Wednesday.
Thank you.
All right, goodbye.
Bye.
Bye bye,
Good to see you.
everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
That'd be good to see you.
Good afternoon, ma.
See you too, sir. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so
I
much.
really loved your interventions.
I hope you are
Abi,
live in
thank you so
Abuja.
much for bringing us together.
Unfortunately, no. I ran
Hmm.
into some logistics